Welcome to Venture Unscripted, a podcast where we talk with founders and entrepreneurs about their journey from 0 to 1. Well, welcome to Venture Unscripted. Today I've got with me John Pottenger, who is an entrepreneur extraordinaire. I think we've started several businesses, so I'd love to just dive in a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I started a business 20 years ago, and then a couple of businesses since then. And the first business I started was a wedding video business, and I fell into it because people were asking me to photograph their wedding and film their wedding. I'm like, I don't do this. I don't know what you're talking about. But I had a scrappy little camera. I did the first one for like $400, and I used all of it to buy lights and messed up a couple things, and they didn't care. They loved it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then 2 or 3 people asked, and I just kind of fell into it. So I didn't really have, like maybe some people, an idea to go do with something. I kind of fell into that one, and I'm still doing that business. 20 years, this year is 20 years that I'm still
awesome.
doing that business.
Why did they choose you? Just out of curiosity. You didn't...
I was in college or just out of college, and it was like engagement photos, and I did pretty decent at taking some photos of people getting engaged, and they liked them, so they said, hey, why don't you shoot our wedding, which I think that's a huge risk.
Yes.
So I was like, I said no, and so I don't know, they just
Persistent.
liked what they saw before. So
that's awesome.
Yep.
And you're doing that today.
So I don't do photography anymore. It's just video.
Yes.
So it's a wedding video company.
Okay.
Coastline Studios is the name of it. But we've been fortunate enough to be called in by some of the bigger names in town to do some of their big weddings, and so we've done 6-7 figure weddings, and we've done the small ones too. So it's pretty fun.
The range.
Yep. And I think what I love most about that business is the team aspect. When I was in photography, it was all about me. What can I do? I'm the artist, which I love those people who can do that, but I guess I really wanted a team, and it lowered the stress level. It made it more fun. Yeah. I loved having, we wear these headsets so we can talk to each other during the day, and I just feel like I'm like on walkie-talkies all day with my friends, just, talking through it, so.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did you, from that first customer, after that first wedding, just out of curiosity, how did you get 2, 3, 4, 5? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, and maybe your audience might be interested to know. I had another job going on the side. I think a lot of entrepreneurs maybe start something on the side.
Yes.
So I was working full-time and had this going on the side. So the risk was really low. It was a low-risk way to start. So, I mean, the first one I did, it went, like I said, okay, and then all of a sudden I had 2 or 3 more, and I think it was through just my college network, just some of the people who were getting engaged at college, and then word started to spread, and then I made a website, and I told my friends, so it was all just kind of word of mouth to begin with. Over the years, there's only so many people in your immediate network, so I had to advertise somewhere, but it was just word of mouth and friends. That's kind of how it grew.
What were some key mistakes you made early on that you look back and you're like, I can't believe I did that, but this is what I did?
Some of them aren't necessarily mistakes that I made, but things I learned, which would be the contracts that I have. I can tell you that most contracts out there are probably built from something bad that happened to protect yourself. So, I had one mother of the bride who was a momzilla, is what I'll call her. And she said, there weren't enough photos of her from the wedding, and
because it's about her.
Because that's what apparently. So she said, obviously the most important person at the wedding is the bride, but the second most important person at the wedding is the mother of the bride. And I said, and I had a little, some guts, and I said, actually, I'd argue that the groom or other partner, is the most important person at the, and she's like, pause. Well, after that, and then I didn't continue because could have said maid of honor, like all these. But anyway, so from that, I made a line in my contract that says we are not responsible for maintaining any quantity or of shots of any individual. Right. We're not responsible for following any lists or anything like. So it kind of freed me so that if it ever happened again, I could say this is why this is in here. And there's countless things like that have happened that have. So it's kind of, I can't give you that advice ahead, but I can say you learn from those. I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but just things that happen. You're like, oh, we need to not let that happen again.
Yes.
So
how did you end up knowing how to price things?
I started charging $1,000 for a wedding, my first 3 after the initial one. And then over time, you're like, this is way too much work. I can't do I can't live like this. So you do have to raise your prices.
You've eaten enough ramen.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I do think that one of the things we share with our interns all the time is you do have to kind of pay your dues. Like I think people can come into this market or any market and just say, I'm fresh out of college. I know what people charge for software development or whatever. I'm going to charge, $150 an hour. But you're like, you just graduated, you don't know anything.
Yes.
So maybe don't charge that. So my advice to people is charge what you're worth and what your experience offers. And I think it takes some time. Build up that confidence, build up that resume before you raise your prices.
That's good.
Yeah.
And when you first started it, did you have an end goal in mind, or did you kind of just fall into it and you're like, oh, I got to figure out where I want to go? Like, how do you? Because where the business is now, and I want to get there, is different than where it started. So how did that happen?
I didn't have an end goal because, again, I fell into it. I was working full-time at the time. I got to a point where it had been 3 years that I had been doing both my full-time job and this. I was starting to get overwhelmed, so I backed off my full-time job to 4 days a week instead of 5. But even then, it was too much. So I was going to decide, am I going to go full into my full-time job and cut this or go the other way? And I actually decided to go full into my full-time job. And then they laid me off. And just before I had cut everything so I'm like, okay, here we go. Let's go full time into this business. But I never had like a up until that point, it was never something I was like, I have this dream of being this big, thing. Now there's other businesses I've started since, which maybe I have bigger dreams for, but this one I kind of just fell into. I didn't really have a big dream for it. Yeah.
Now, where is it today? And tell me about the evolution story of how it is, where it is today.
Yeah. So, it's a 20-year journey. The first 6 years I was, the first 3 years, I guess I was, working full time, and then I had 3 years where I wasn't. And then after that point, after 6 years, I decided to cut photography, kind of became a jack of all trades, master of none, and decided this isn't the best way to do this. So 2009, 2012, I decided to just go full in on video. And that was the best decision. And this is something at least I would share with people is, when you're starving as an entrepreneur, you're looking for anything
that moves,
anything that I can get some money from. So for me, it was, in this business, it was senior photos, it was family photos, it was, bar mitzvahs, it was anything I could think of. And it was photo and video and maybe a little web here and there. And I was like, you just can't be the best at one thing if you're trying to do all the things. So one piece of advice I would say is, try to focus in on what I think it's From Good to Great. I forget the author of the book, but he talks about the hedgehog principle, which is there's 3 circles. One circle is you need to be passionate about what you're doing. And at the time, I was realizing I'm not passionate about photography. I am about video. So I decided that was strike one. Another one is you have to be able to make money at it. So that's the second principle. And I was able to make money at photography, maybe not a ton. And the third one is that you have to be able to say you have the potential to be one of the best. You don't have to be one of the best, but you can see that you're maybe gifted in this, or that you, at least in your area or maybe in your city, you have the potential to be one of the best.
Yes.
And that's not from an egotistical standpoint. It's just like, can you say, I have a talent for this?
It's a strength.
Yeah. And I did not see that with my photography business. I'm like, I felt people that were better than I. Whereas with video, I was doing stuff at the time where nobody else was doing. So, I give that piece of advice to people all the time is, can you make money at it? Can you be one of the best? And are you passionate about it? And that can really help you focus in on what should you be doing.
That's good.
So
niching down.
Yeah.
Yep. So you niched down on video, and that was
2009.
2009.
Yep.
Okay. And then today, you're doing much more than weddings, right? I mean, you're doing a lot of different cool things.
Yeah. So I've been fortunate, blessed to have a great team that can run most of the operations of the wedding business. So I still shoot, on occasion, some weddings, to try to save myself to do the bigger ones if I can. So the team kind of runs that business for the most part, a couple of employees. One failure that I launched in 2008 was a cool idea, especially at the time, was to do this tour of real estate. So at the time I had these Steadicam vests that you would wear, and it was this big thing you would have to put on, and it was bulky. And I would walk through a house, and then the realtor would put that on their website to try to show what it looks like. I called it the ultimate tour. of course, it was in 2008, and do you remember what happened in 2008?
Yeah, we had a little bit of a crisis.
Yeah, a little bit of a housing bubble
Yes.
pop. So that business never took off. It was a great idea, but it just didn't. It was the wrong time. And now these days they do certain things like that. There's still, video is actually growing in real estate like crazy. Realtors will spend tons of money on video. Maybe not the same exact concept, but that one was a start and a fail.
And that one for a second.
Yeah.
When you started that, like how did you get to the point where you're like, because a lot of startups and entrepreneurs have a hard time when they start something to know when they should stop something. How did you know when to stop that?
Yeah. It was something I started on the side because I had the Coastline wedding video thing going. I kind of, when people stopped calling, when I pushed and no one was answering, when I, networked, I tried to go to different realtors, people I knew, tried to get referrals, tried to offer specials. The value at that time, it was just the market wasn't there.
Yeah.
Some people loved the idea, but they couldn't afford it, and it was fairly affordable. It was like $200 to $400 for a tour.
Yep.
And for me, it was like an hour of my time, and then editing was not very much. So it was, I could swing it, but people just didn't keep calling. The customers who liked it just wasn't worth their money because the market wasn't there.
Yeah.
So
was that like a month or two of you trying and pushing, or was that longer?
It was longer. I paid a developer to create a whole request system. So if you went through the website, there was a whole back end where you could pick, I gave you 5 royalty-free songs you could pick from for what's just that way. I wasn't picking the song. I gave, there was how many square feet it was, and it would give them a quote right through the thing about how much their tour would be. So I had a bunch of programming I paid for.
Wow.
And so it was probably a good year and a half maybe. But again, that bubble, 2008, 2009.
Oh, yeah.
It was at least, maybe if I'd stuck with it, it might have kept going, but I didn't do it.
That's hard. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think I was passionate about it either.
Yeah, that's a big thing, like you just said.
Yeah, it wasn't one of those circles.
Yes.
It was an idea.
Yes.
So.
Interesting.
Yep.
And then, so beyond that, now where are you guys headed with the business?
Yeah. So in 2013, so 10 years ago, I built a business with my one of my good friends, Jay Irwin, and we decided I was getting video requests for corporate commercial work, which didn't really fit in the wedding genre, but people would see the good video I would do on weddings, and they would say, "Hey, why don't you come and do my company video?"
Sure.
And I would say, sure, but I didn't really have the staff for it. I didn't have, all the ideas that I needed to
A wedding
pull
and a
that
corporate
off.
event is a little bit different.
Very different. And not even corporate events, but just promotional.
Promotional stuff.
So so that's what we formed another company called Match Frame Creative. And that's been going for 10 years. And that one is a partnership with my buddy. And I could talk hours about partnerships. But that business has been thriving. And, we have fortunate to do some really big jobs with Steelcase and some of these other, in town here, some bigger names, Amway and that kind of thing. So
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you said you could tell a little bit about partnerships. What are some thoughts on partnerships as people are thinking about starting a business and partnering with someone?
Yeah, it's one of the best ideas you could have, but one of the hardest things you can do. It's so good if you find the right partner because you're not alone. You don't have to have the pressure of making your own decisions. If something bad happens, you're not shouldering it all yourself.
Right.
If if you have you're stuck, you can work it out together.
Yes.
It's just the cord of 3 strands. Having more people is just going to be better. But you literally are. It's like getting married to another person because if you've never been married or if you've never had kids. I say when you get married, you realize how selfish you are.
Yes.
I want it done this way.
Yes.
Or whatever. And then once you have kids, you realize your time is even less.
Yes.
And you're like, I want my time. And so your awareness of your selfishness creeps to the forefront.
Yes.
And when you get a business partner, all of those things come to the forefront.
Yes.
So, so I would say to people who are thinking about being in a partnership, just know that you're basically getting married.
Yes.
And you're going to need to find a way to communicate. You're going to need to be able to talk through the tough. You're going to have some fights.
Yeah.
You're going to have to find your selfishness and find a way to lower that.
Squash it, yeah.
If you're not willing to work on yourself as a partner, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
If you think you're the best, you're the top, you've got all the answers, it's going to fail.
Yeah.
And the same if your partner has those same things, it's not going to work. You have to have humility. You have to have tons of communication.
Yeah.
And you got to be willing to admit you're wrong.
Yes. That's hard.
It's really hard. But I can tell you after 10 years, it's been the best thing ever. We've grown through those things. So yeah, that's probably what I would say is for people thinking about that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah. It's really hard to find a good person to partner with.
It is.
And that's someone you knew for a while, right? And so is that accurate?
Yeah,
okay.
We knew each other. We had worked together on an alumni film board, alumni board for a film school, and we had kind of worked together a couple of times, and I just kind of knew he was the right guy. He didn't do a lot of the editing, and I did editing, but I didn't do a lot of the strategy and creative, and he did a lot of those things. So it was kind of like, hey, we can complement each other.
Yes.
And what's great is as we've come, 10 years from now, we've really been able to embrace our differences. I'm sure I drive him crazy with some of the things that I do.
Yes.
And there's certain things he just does things differently. And instead of seeing that as a frustration, which took me, time to work through that, I now see it as a gift.
Yes.
I don't think this way. I don't have these gifts. And sometimes there's times where I get frustrated. I'm like, no, this is the gift that he's bringing, not the lack that that I feel like I'm better at.
Yes.
Don't you try to look for the strengths.
Yes.
And that really is. It takes a lot of humility to do that. And if both partners are doing it, it'll work. So
when you guys formed that partnership, do you think you were that level, because you're speaking a lot to a very strategic level of his strengths are not mine and my strengths are not his, so there's this really good complement.
Yeah.
Did you have, when you guys went into it as a partnership, was that an intentional thought process, or was that more like you and I have the same foundational kind of value system, and I think we can work well together?
I think what started it off was we immediately sensed a level of integrity between the two of us, and
that value system.
Value system, similar belief system, all of those things that you have to know if this person's going to be, trustworthy,
right?
Reliable,
right?
Integrous, and so all of those things were clear to both of us way back then. So. That's probably what I would say. You need to find someone who you really know. I trust this person.
Yes. Through the thick and the thin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. But we had no idea the strengths. That I didn't know what strengths he had. We did a strengths finder. A
probably
personality
later.
thing within the first year to see what our strengths were, and even then I didn't even understand. What his versus mine, and. I didn't know how they would complement.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, that's your strengths. Okay, these are, so I think it's just time and experience that really brought it out. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. And then what happened after Match Frame? So what year was that again?
That was 2013, so 10 years ago.
Yep.
And then more recently, in the pandemic, I actually had let's bring in SantaTrek here, which is where you come in and how I got to know you. So I had an opportunity to invest some money somewhere, and so I had this idea. So this is probably maybe closer to what maybe your audience is, where they have an idea to do an app for doctors, and I called it SantaTrek. Sano meaning heal, it's Latin for heal, and trek meaning journey, so it's like your healing journey. And so I decided to build this app, and it's still kind of in the works, and it's been a 3-year journey, and it's been slowed down because my budget kind of ran out a little bit, but I'm still kind of pushing through, and I'm at the place where I'm about to test it in the market. And some of the things that, I don't know if you've talked about what you guys do, where you're trying to do testing. What was the terminology?
Like market validation.
Market validation.
Yeah.
I'm about to do some market validation, but I did it backwards, I think. You would tell me now, where you should do the market validation before you spend all the money. So I didn't quite do that, but since I have something tangible, I can at least still do the market validation. And as we've talked, your audience doesn't know this, but as we've talked, I'm not sure if I made maybe you could do the aspirin. Did you already talk about that in previous episodes?
Aspirin versus vitamin problem?
Talk about that real quick, and then I'll explain how it ties in.
Yeah, so you and I have chatted a lot about the aspirin versus vitamin problem of trying to figure out, is this an aspirin problem worth solving, or is it more of a vitamin? And either are okay, just knowing that if it's an aspirin problem, usually people are they're just giving you, they're taking their wallets out. They're like, give me it, I need it.
Yep.
And so I think that's what we're trying to find that with Sanotrack.
Right.
What is that? And so it's often a journey of who is the target market, right? Because with Sanotrack, there is maybe 3 or 4 possibilities of who that end audience would be, of where's the value, and what value proposition are we delivering to them. So that's what I think, you and I have been talking about, is how do we find that aspirin problem? Because you want to try your best to stay away from the vitamin, because the more you talk to people, they're like, well, it's a nice to have.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need it. And so I think that's what we're trying to find.
That's exactly it. So, and just to give a little more detail, I don't know if my app is for doctors, which is what I thought I built, or if it's actually better for the patient.
Right.
So if I'm chasing a doctor and trying to get revenue, then I need to be thinking about how to structure that. Whereas if it's for a patient, it might be a completely different app with different functions.
That's right.
So I'm about to test it here in the next, hopefully, month or so, and put it into a couple of doctors' offices and see who likes it more, and who finds the value.
Right.
And so that's a in-process one.
That's right.
So,
and what have you learned through that?
Oh my gosh. Well, I learned a lot about building an app through your team and interacting with you guys. So I feel like I can speak the language. And when I ask for a small thing, I realize that there's a lot that goes behind it.
Yes. Similar to how we were just talking about in videography, the scene, the setup, the cameras, the angles, the light. Like there's just a lot people don't know about.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot that goes behind making it happen. So I've learned a lot about app development. I think I'm learning about the market validation process.
Yeah.
And think that we're honing that together. I'm thankful to have that. So I could have done a better job, I think, of validating the market. We did a little bit of that, but I think I kind of went to my friends and kind of maybe went to the yes men kind of mentality. Yeah. Kind of like these people who I knew. They're like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Right.
But I didn't really call strangers, which I actually did some market validation or testing, I guess, via phone calls and meetings about a year ago. And I started calling people I didn't know and pitching them the app, even though it was like I had a thing I could show them. It wasn't working fully. And I started to see that's when it was like, oh, maybe this isn't for doctors. Maybe this is for something else. So we're kind of going to see. So I've learned, market validation is huge.
Yes.
And I think you guys are you putting together a course for that?
Yeah, we have a market validation funnel course. Yeah.
Okay.
Masterclass.
That's coming out soon then?
Coming out soon, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that I would highly say that's one of the most important things you could do as an entrepreneur is you need to validate your idea. Don't spend all this money.
Yeah.
And find out if this idea has any feet to it, any grounds, any legs, as the right words,
Right.
So,
and I think one of the things I appreciate about you, John, is going back to what you talked about with partners, you had said being in a partnership requires a level of humility and self-introspection. I would say the same about even building a product, because it's like oftentimes we get so attached to an idea and marrying ourselves to the idea that being very introspective about, like you had said, you're like, well, wait a minute. Is this, I've been saying it's for this person, but is it actually for this person? And so kind of changing directions on your original idea and pivoting.
Which takes the humility to say, I might have been wrong.
That's
is
right.
What you're saying?
Yes, absolutely.
Which I think you told me about, was it Instagram was a good story, right? You said that kind of they
started as a company called Bourbon. And so it was just crazy, right? I mean, they started as Bourbon and they became Instagram when they recognized, and it was an app to find local bourbon, and they realized the app, most people used photos, taking pictures in the app. And so as soon as they realized that, they're like, what if we pivoted our entire company to just be a photo sharing app?
Right.
And now Instagram.
Yeah, and that's so huge. If you've got, the tour business I created, it was an idea, but I realized, this isn't going to fly.
Yeah.
Or in this case with our app, it's like maybe I need to pivot.
Yes.
So like maybe it's time to cut something off, or maybe it's time to pivot. But that takes some humility.
Huge humility.
Willingness to say you're wrong.
Yes.
And so that's a tough thing. Like, when do you decide?
Yes.
To quit versus pivot versus keep
Persevere.
going.
Yes.
And I think a lot of that can be done through that market validation process. So if you keep, so here's an example we talked about. So this studio space that we're in right now, I pitched the idea of you coming in and using the studio as just a soft, like, hey, would this be of value to you? And you like jumped on it.
Yes.
So that's market validation.
Yeah,
so this
absolutely.
is something that might work.
Yes.
So that's a good way to tell your audience, like, hey, let's do some testing. Let's do some conversations.
Yes.
What can you do to find out if it's worth moving forward, pivoting, or quitting?
Absolutely. I've been very impressed, by the way. Studio Jefferson. What's the website?
StudioJefferson.com.
StudioJefferson.com.
Yeah.
So
Here in Grand Rapids.
as you guys can see, we've got, and you can't see out of frame. There's lighting, there's cameras, there's angles, and you'll see wonderful video quality as all of this was set up by you and your team.
And a team,
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's pretty neat the setup they have. And so when you did, I felt like you did it absolutely the right way. You set up a landing page, you soft pitched me in a phone call. You didn't spend, hey, we're going to build this out, $90,000 and add this and add that. You're like, we already have the equipment. We already have the space. Let's try it.
Let's see if people want to use it.
And and when you soft pitched me, I was like, take my money.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's great. So again, market validation seems to be the key to all of this stuff.
Yes.
So
and tell the audience a little bit about Studio Jefferson. So like, where did the idea come from, and like, why do you want to do this?
Yeah. So we were with 2020 and the pandemic. We hit a really big low financially, and then one of our clients was a hospital here in town. They needed a lot of work for COVID-related stuff. They got a bunch of grants for video work, and so we had a really great year financially right after COVID. So it was like the worst that we've ever had in our business to the best that we've ever had.
That's great.
So through the blessing of that, we were able to set aside money, and we were renting, and we've always wanted to own a business or own a building.
Yes.
And so this one came on the market. We jumped on it. And for us, it's perfect. There's an office side, and there's this garage kind of space that we converted into this studio. And so it was like, if we had a studio, how could we use it?
Right.
And so we knew we would find ways to use it for, like Steelcase, making, chair promos and desk promos and stuff. But how would we use it in other ways? And so we've always had this dream of, what if we could have people come in, they don't have to think about the cameras, they don't have to think about even the editing, we can live edit it for you, they don't have to wait for us to set up the lighting. That's, for us, that's a many $1,000, a day kind of process, whereas you could come in for a fraction of that. You just walk in, you're ready to go, and you get a ton of content. So it was this idea that we had, and you're our first kind of test subject to make it work. So
and it's been awesome, I'll say. So
Yeah.
if you're ever go to the website. If you're on the fence, do it.
Check it out.
I think Bryce from our team said it really well. He goes, we want all this video quality, and we want our strategy for our company is to let's get out and give away as much content as possible. And so for us, that's really what we want to do. And Bryce had said, hey, you want to find someone that owns a boat. You don't want to be the one owning the boat.
Yeah, that's true. I know someone who owns a boat and how much work he puts into it.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's tons of effort been put behind this that we can just walk in really easily and have a conversation.
Yeah,
so,
that's great.
Yeah.
That's fun. I love this validation. It feels good when you get validated.
Yeah,
so
it certainly does. Yes.
Yep.
So okay, so what next?
What's the next thing?
After. So you talked about Sanotrek.
Yeah. So I think people like you and I have this bug, and we just keep wanting to start new things. Or in your case, it's coach and help people start new things. So the latest thing we're starting is there's a company called Mondo. Mondo is myself, my business partner Jay, and then another partner of ours. His name is Jesse, and he came to us from the petroleum industry.
Okay.
Which I didn't know there was a petroleum industry, but if you think about, you go to a gas station, there's the store, there's the point of sale, there's the TV in the gas pump itself, there's all these different things, there's the trucks, there's just a whole industry there. And it's big money. It's oil, it's gas.
Yes.
So he came to us from that world doing accreditations, where he would, accredit gas stations, make sure their fuel is clean. And that gives them marketing opportunities. So he needed a video or marketing team to help him sell marketing packages for his company. And his company is called Accredited Petroleum. So the three of us merged together. We created Mondo, and a very close tie in with fuel and gas in this industry is racing. So NASCAR, IndyCar, all these different industries of racing. So what we actually did is we have a certain roster of athletes, drivers, who we have one who's Jeffrey Earnhardt, was the grandson of Dale Earnhardt.
Sure.
And he's in the NASCAR circuit in the Xfinity level. And then We have someone who is joining us from the IndyCar circuit, and we have a couple of great kids here locally. One of them, Biniam, he's a young black kid. He's 12 years old, I think, 13, somewhere in there. He's running these kind of the lowest, the smallest, but his dream is to be NASCAR.
That's
and
awesome.
We have the guy who's in NASCAR who can mentor him and give him the path. So what we are doing with all these different racers is we're trying to help broker races for them, which is buy the races so that they can race, because it's too long to get into, but we're paying for raising money and getting sponsors for these athletes so they can race. But when you do that, you want the sponsors to get the most for their money, which means video production or marketing or photography. So we're doing marketing, photography, video for sponsors as well as for our athletes. And that's how Jay and I got involved, because when you buy a sticker on a car, you probably won't get a lot of value out of it. So where we hope to come in is to provide so much value that it just makes so much more sense to go with someone like us. And instead of just sponsoring one race for $300,000, which is what people will pay for your logo to be on the car, what if you could sponsor a whole season with Jeffrey Earnhardt? And what if it's not just a whole season? What if it's a whole roster of drivers and their seasons, and you get to use all the marketing, video, photo that we put together for you? You don't have to do anything. We give you the content, and you can use that. So that's what we're building right now. So that's the latest. That's the future.
Oh,
so,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And how did that deal come all about?
Jesse, he came to us. He's like, "Hey guys, I've got this idea," and we kind of were like, "What? What do you fuel accreditation?" And okay, NASCAR, that's interesting. Jeffrey Earnhardt, that's interesting. But he kind of slowly brought us into the idea of it, and so it was really Jesse that brought the idea to us, because he needed something to sell. He's a great salesperson. This is another thing, is like with Jay and I, with our corporate commercial video company, which is Match Frame Creative, we never had what we call the gas pedal. If we wanted to step on the gas and get a bunch of work, we didn't really have a way or a mechanism, or there's no website or a magazine that we could advertise in. It was just, we always got to work through word of mouth. So we never had a gas pedal or a salesperson. We tried doing like Constant Contact and mailing lists, and nothing really worked. It was always, we just got lucky and had word of mouth, just keep it going. But when Jesse came in, he offers something completely different than myself and Jay. So you have me, I'm a COO type person, like operations and systems. You got Jay, who's a strategy, and then Jesse is like sales. He is super comfortable sitting in a room with these billionaires and totally comfortable pitching them. I would be intimidated. So it's just again, another partnership. But we trusted his integrity. All those things that needed to be there were there. So that's kind of how it landed in our lap.
Oh, that's awesome. Same value system was the same, and just different strengths. That's
exactly.
what you need.
In this case, we saw his strengths.
Yes.
Whereas with Jay and I, we didn't necessarily know each other. We just knew each other's integrity and values. But in this case, we're like, he's a gas pedal.
That's awesome.
So
nice.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at today.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
and if you could summarize, in one to three things out of all the things we talked about, what would you say in all your experiences? It's kind of a hard time people have with this question, because they're like, if I had one thing to share, what would it be, or two or three? So, I think hiring the right people. Again, this comes from the Good to Great book. It's saying getting the right people on the bus. Yes. So you need to have the right people on the bus. Yes. The right people on your team is crucial. So whether they're partners or team members, or I guess employees, getting the right people is key. And so that's one of the biggest things I could say. And we talked a lot about that already. Learn from your mistakes. Where you said something and you didn't say it clearly enough, and so that they were disappointed, and then you ended up eating a lot of the cost to make up for it. That's another thing I'd say is, don't just be willing to put the customer first in every single business. And I've even seen your grace with me, where like I'd ask for something and you guys have eaten costs to make it right. And I think that goes a long way with any customer. So just be willing to do what you can to bend over backwards, because your reputation is everything. So lower the ego. Bring the humility. Huge. Work hard. Be willing to lose some money, knowing that the payoff down the road is going to be far more worth
losing this $1,000 on this job or something.
Short-term pain, long-term gain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those would be a couple things that pop into my brain.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for chatting with me today.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks for
it.
having me.
Yep.